So we attack in with everything. And our opponent scoops it up. Hi there, my name's the BigCraigO, and today we're going to be doing the second in our deck tech series, and this time we're going to be focusing in on red deck wins. So if you're interested in finding out a little bit about some of the developments as far as red deck win go and how to play hopefully pretty well, feel free to watch the rest of this video. I'll be going through and doing a breakdown of what makes up, and also talking about different strategies when playing the game. After that, we'll be actually going through and playing some games where you can actually see how it works and performs actually on Arena. So if you're keen, feel free to sit back, give us a like and a subscribe, and watch these videos. So first things first, there's obviously a bunch of different builds when it comes to red deck wins. It's one of the most popular decks that's been around for a very, very long time. Be it goblins, be it other types of creatures. Ultimately what it comes down to is the whole strategy behind this particular deck is to put a bunch of creatures onto the battlefield, basically make them do as much damage as possible in the quickest way possible. Hence the term RDW, red deck wins. The key things when it comes to a red deck is primarily to make sure that you have the adequate amount of burn or creatures to be able to do that maximum 20 points of damage as quickly as possible. In this particular build, we're going to talk about the types of creatures and cards that are going to support those creatures to mean that they can push through the maximum amount of damage as quickly as possible. So here we go, let's start off. Okay, so we've got basically a very strong mana curve. So to start off with, let's have a bit of a look at what that looks like. In total, we have 28 creatures, which is a lot. We have 12 non-creatures, and out of those non-creatures, we have 4 equipment. We have a number of instants and sorceries that are designed to cause damage to our opponents. The mana curve itself, as you can see here, the average out across the whole deck is 2.6, and we have some synergies when it comes to reducing some of the cost on some of the more expensive elements of the card, specifically in the 6+ drop you can see here, or a 6 casting cost, and that's in the form of Ember Cleave, which is an item that gets cheaper the more creatures that are attacking. As far as the rest of the deck goes, you can see here that we've got 10 1-drops, 10 2-drops, and then we have 13 3-drops. So in essence, this deck tops out at the 3 mana costing point. So let's have a look in to see what's actually... Okay, to start off with, let's go through and actually have a look at the mana curve. So in the 1-drop slot, we have 3 different spells, 2 creatures, and 1 burn spell. To start those off, we have a Feathered Champion. Our Feathered Champion is a 1-drop 1/1 with First Strike and Haste, so it gets to attack the turn that comes down. It also has the ability of being able to give +1/+0 to any knights that are also attacking with it, and any equipping cost is -3, so it costs 3 less to equip any equipment to this particular creature. Second spot on there we have is a Fireblade Charger. It's also a 1-drop 1/1. It doesn't have haste unless you equip an item to it. So for example, in this particular one, the Ember Cleave. The cool thing about this is that when it dies, it will do damage equal to its power to a target. So that's quite good too. The third and final 1-drop slot that we've got is for the Shock Spell. There's only 2 of these rather than the full 4, so there's 2 of these. This does 2 damage to any target. It's quite useful for taking out those earlier creatures. The other thing that can be good to do is to cause that final bit of damage to your opponent. In the True Drop slot, we have 2 single Rimrock Knights. The cool thing about the Rimrock Knight is it's a 3/1. It can't block, but it only costs 2 mana. The other thing is it has an instant adventure attached to it, which is in the form of Boulder Rush, which costs 1 red. Target creature that you control gets +2/+0 until end of turn. That's pretty good. If you put this onto, for example, a Fireblade Charger that's about to die, it all of a sudden makes it go from being a 1/1 to a 3/1, which means it can do 3 damage if it dies. We have a full 4-play set of the Robber of the Rich, 1 red, 1 other for a 2/2 human archer rogue. Basically, this has got haste, which means it can attack as soon as it comes onto the battlefield. It's also got reach, which is quite good for those pesky flyers that generally get in the way of you being able to win the game. The other thing, and this is probably the big benefit for this particular card, whenever Robber of the Rich attacks, if defending player has more cards in hand than you, exile the top card of their library. During any turn you attacked with a rogue, you may cast that card and you may spend mana as though it were the mana of any color to cast that spell. It's a great way for you to be able to get some extra cards drawn that you can cast, because as you can imagine, emptying your hand is the goal of this deck, to get as much power onto the battlefield as quickly as possible. Finally, we have 4 Shatter Skull Smashing cards. This is the ability to be able to cause X damage. So for 2 red and X other, Shatter Skull Smashing deals X damage divided as you choose among up to 2 target creatures and or planeswalkers. If X is 6 or more, Shatter Skull Smashing deals twice X damage divided as you choose among them instead. It's a great way of clearing a path so that your smaller creatures can get in and cause that lethal damage. The other thing is too, if you find yourself in a bit of a pinch, you can actually bring this card into play. It comes into play tapped unless you pay 3 life, but it comes into play as a mountain, so it just gives you that extra ability to push through. We move on to the 3-drop slots, and now this is a lot of spells, but the reason for this is because these are some very big utility cards in here. So we'll start at the top with one of another all-star, which is the Bone Crusher Giants. 1 red, 2 other for a giant. It's a 4/3. It has an instant adventure attached to it, which is 1 red and 1 other for Stomp. Damage can't be prevented this turn, and Stomp deals 2 damage to any target. That's pretty cool, just allowing you to push through some extra damage. The other thing that's really cool is once you've, say for example, done the Stomp, you'll be able to cast this spell, and whenever Bone Crusher Giant becomes the target of a spell, Bone Crusher Giant deals 2 damage to that spell's controller. This is quite useful. The key thing here to remember though is if it's an ability that's already on the battlefield, it's not actually going to class as a spell, so just be mindful of that. We run 2 Soul Seers. They're 1 red and 3 other for an instant spell. Soul Seer deals 5 damage to target creature or planeswalker. That permanent loses indestructible until end of turn. Very, very useful. We run a full 4 playset of Annex Hardened in the Forge for 2 red and 1 other. It's a legendary enchantment creature, a demigod, and its power is equal to your devotion to red. So Annex power is equal to the devotion to red. Whenever Annex or another non-token creature you control dies, create a 1/1 red Satyr creature token with this creature can't block. If the creature had power 4 or greater, create 2 of those tokens instead. This is an amazing card, and it's probably one of the linchpins for this deck being so successful. The ability for you to build up a board state that allows you to play this and have quite a high power, and then push through, giving your creature, say for example, an Embercleave, giving Annex an Embercleave, and allowing them to have double strike and trample is significant. Finally, in the 3-drop slot, we have the Phoenix of Ash, 2 red, 1 other for a 2/2 creature, flying creature, Phoenix. It also has haste, so it can attack the turn it comes in. You can pay 1 red and 2 other to give Phoenix +2/+0 until end of turn, which is quite good pump ability. And it can escape from your graveyard. So you can pay 2 red, 2 other, and exile 3 cards, and you can recast it from your graveyard. Instead of coming in as a 2/2, it comes in actually as a 3/3. Quite good use. Finally, we're sort of rounding out to the creature side of things. We have in our 4th-drop slot, and there's only 3 of these. 3 red, 1 other for Torbrand, Thane of Redfell, legendary creature, dwarf noble. He, as you can see there, is a 2/4. If a red source you control would deal damage to an opponent or a permanent an opponent controls, it deals that much damage +2 instead. It's a 2/4. This is awesome. You think about all of those small, tiny little satyrs that Annex makes if it dies, or another creature dies while Annex is on the battlefield. they all of a sudden go from doing 1 point of damage to doing 3 points of damage. This can overwhelm opponents quite quickly. Finally, we have the only equipment card that's in this particular deck, which is actually Embercleave. It's 2 red and 4 other, but it actually very rarely costs that. It's a legendary artifact equipment. It has flash, so you can cast it at any point that you could cast an instant spell. This spell costs 1 less to cast for each attacking creature you control. When Embercleave enters the battlefield, attach it to a target creature you control. Equipped creature gets +1/+1 and has double strike and trample. Ordinarily, it would cost 3 for you to equip it to another creature, but obviously remembering the synergies that we have in this deck, so things like, for example, the champion, the favorite champion, would be able to equip this for free because it would cost less than 3 and then -3. The goal for this particular deck is obviously to cause as much damage as quickly as possible, and hopefully we'll be able to show that in the videos that we've got coming up. To round out the deck as a whole, we've got 3 Castle Embereth. Now, this particular card is fantastic from a point of view of that it gives you the ability to pump up the rest of your creatures by +1/+0. So if you have a bunch of those satyrs that we were talking about before, and they're swinging in and doing 1 point of damage each, you can actually make them do 2 points of damage each. And if there's something like Torbrandon as well, all of a sudden they're doing 2 points plus an additional 2 points, so 4 points each, which is fantastic and nothing to be sneezed at. Alright, we also round out with 17 mountains. It's the mainstay of this deck. You don't need anything other than just basic mountains. That's everything for this deck, so let's go and actually see how it performs. Okay, so one of the suggestions that came through about these deck techs from one of our watchers was that we might want to do a basic playthrough against Sparky so that it's pretty easy for me to stop and talk about what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. So I'm going to play this first game just to show you the basics of my thought process, just in case I miss anyone playing actually in the main sort of game against human opponents. So first things first, when you get your opening hand, is to have a look at what your mana curve looks like. I keep talking about this. So from my perspective, I'm looking at this. I know that I've got 1, 2, 3 potential lands there, which would mean I could cast the Phoenix of Ash. I've got a 1-drop, so something I can cast in the first turn. I've got a 2-drop, so I can cast in the second turn and potentially third turn. I've also got a little bit of removal to clear a path if I need to. This is a pretty good hand, so I'm going to keep it. So my opponent obviously is AI, so they're not particularly smart when it comes to making play choices, but I just want to show you how it works. So the very first thing that I would do, play a land. I always say hello. And a bit of love, and then wish him a good dance. Play the hasted champion. Now, haste means that it can attack this turn, so we just go in and get that first blood. Okay, so at this point in time, my champion has been stopped by the orator, so I have a couple of different options ahead of me. The first thing I can do is play a land, because that's not going to change. Now, I could play the Robber of the Rich and swing in, but ultimately they could block it, and that would be bad for me. They could also block my favorite champion, which would be also bad. So what I would probably do is I would look at using my shock spell to clear the way. So basically stopping them from gaining life, but also clearing the way so I can do another point of damage. It's not a particularly effective use of all of my mana this turn, but it is what it is. Okay, so at this point in time, I can play another land, and I have to make a decision as to what I want to do. Now, I could do 1 point of damage here and then attack in, hoping that they block. If that happens, it means that this particular Loxodon Linebreaker would be destroyed because this has first strike. The other option, of course, is to set up for ladder turns and give myself the opportunity by putting a Robber of the Rich in or casting the Phoenix of Ash. Sparky's getting impatient with me because I haven't done anything. So what I'm going to do is pop down the Phoenix of Ash because it's got haste and it can fly. And I'm going to just attack with it for 2 points of damage. Now, my opponent in a normal sense would probably look at attacking in as they're doing here. I'm not going to block. I'm going to let them do the damage because my life total is also less important to me as far as what's going on at this point in time. Now, I could kill their Loxodon line breaker right now, but I think what I would probably prefer to do is use the Robber of Druich, setting up my board state again, and then swing in to do the maximum amount of damage. So I've done 2 points of damage with the Robber of Druich, 2 points of damage with the Phoenix of Ash, and 1 point of damage with the Feathering Champion. And because we had less cards in hand than our opponent, it's allowed us to take the top card of our opponent's deck, and we can cast it as if it was our spell. Now this is a pump spell. It'll give us +2/+2. I'm not going to worry about casting it. Ordinarily I'd probably cast it onto the Phoenix so that I could push through 4 damage. At this point I'm just going to let them do their thing. Swinging in for another 3 points of damage, and we draw another land. At this point in time, I think what we'll do is swing in again. We get to gain another creature. I'm going to pump up the Phoenix of Ash, so it becomes a 4/2, and we knock them down to 4. I'll cast their 2/2 creature who's on defense. Basically the Loxodon line breaker. If it attacks in, I will block. Basically clearing a path. Okay, so they've pumped up their Loxodon line breaker. As I said, Sparky's not particularly smart. We get our Annex in, and we move on to the attack step. Pump up the Phoenix of Ash just for style points. Doing lethal. No thanks, Sparky. Don't think we'll play again this time. Alright, so you get an idea of how this deck sort of works. It's fairly methodical in the sense of it just plays creatures down and continues to push damage. Sometimes there are some more complex lines, but generally speaking, what you look at doing is actually just maximizing as much as possible the damage that you can give to your opponent. At this point, I'm going to play through a number of games and hopefully get a few victories. Okay, so looking at this hand here, this is a different type of hand. So we've got a number of cards here that are going to be later in the game. I don't know what we're against. I would say that this is probably one that I'll need to mulligan, only because I don't have any 1 or 2 drops, which means we'll basically be sitting back and hoping that I draw the right things. Now that I've gone through and mulliganed, basically I'm looking at this and we've got 1 creature, a bit of removal, and a bunch of equipment. So I'm going to mulligan one more time. Okay, this is not an ideal hand either, but I need to keep at this point because if I continue to mulligan, I'm going to end up with no cards in hand. So I've got to put a number of I need to put 2 cards back. So I'm going to start off by putting the 2 more expensive ones back, and hoping and praying that we draw into some extra land and creatures. Wish our opponent good luck. We have drawn the land we need, so I'm just going to play that through and then pass turn, sit back and basically hope that they play something that we can use our stomp ability on. If not, I'll be using the stomp ability to burn their face. Alright, so it looks like this is some kind of red deck also. Now we're going to take 1 damage from their charger, which is fine. And at this point, I play the Bone Crusher out to basically put a large threat into play that doesn't have haste, whereas the Phoenix of Ash I'll be able to cast an attack next turn if that's what ends up being the best play. The other thing is too, we have a number of removal spells that are available. I'm going to use the Soul Seer. We are going to take another 2 points of damage here. But ultimately, I want to be able to attack in and drop them down to 16 with one hit. Play a second Bone Crusher. Now, at this point in time, I basically got the choice of playing another Bone Crusher so that we know that we're going to be able to push through 4 damage. I could play the Phoenix of Ash and do extra points of damage there, the Robber of the Rich. I think what we'll do is we'll maximise our mana. So we're going to take 4 damage here, which is the equivalent of 1 swing from the Giant, but we've knocked them down to 12. Okay, so they've got a Robber. We have more cards than they do at the moment, so that means that basically we're going to be taking 4 damage. Okay, I'm going to play the second Bone Crusher Giant, and I'm going to attack in for 4, knowing that they can't block with their Rimrock Knight. Now, in theory, they attack with this. We'll see what happens, but if they attack with this and then equip, it will become an 8 by itself, so we need to block carefully. So if they equip that with the Ember Cleave, it will get +1/+1 and double strike. Okay. I'm going to block the Robber of the Rich. We take 5. I'm going to attack again in with the Bone Crusher Giant. This is a little bit risky because if they have a removal spell, they'll be able to knock out one of our creatures, and that means they'll be able to do lethal damage. At this point in time, they sacrifice Torbran. Play another land. Play an Ox. Draw a bunch of more cards. Okay. So we're going to be 1 short. If we attack in, we'd only get to 5. We need to get to 6. So at this point in time, I'm sort of thinking that we need to sit back for now. No attacks. End turn.
Hey, put you in your place, look. Keep your thoughts on the bar like Facebook. Yo, got that for great boy. Send your podcast to the great boy. Hey, put you in your place, look. Keep your thoughts on the bar like Facebook. Yo, got that for great boy. Send your podcast to the great boy.
So they may actually decide to put an Ember Cleave into play as well. So that'll be 3 damage there. Alright, where's that going to? I'm guessing it's going on to the Ox. unfortunately they can kill us now. So it is what it is. That was still a very good game. Okay, here we go. Let's see what happens. At this point in time, we want to make sure that we're pushing as much aggro as possible. And so our opening hand is something that we really want to be strong with, having a good mana curve. Looking at this, we've got no 1-drop, but we do have enough land to be able to cast everything else. So I'm going to keep it. And although we're a little slower immediately, I think that'll pay for us. Longer term, we'll still be okay. Alright, so we play our second land. I'm going to cast a Robber of the Rich, and I'm going to swing in. Okay, if it's a land card that's on top of the deck, it just goes into exile. We don't get to cast that land. Okay. At this point, play a first Annex here. Still going to attack in for 2. Mill another one of their snow lands into their exile. We'll get to scry because they don't have a permanent in play. So at this point in time, we have a number of different options. I'm sort of thinking that I'm going to attack in with both of our creatures. And worst case scenario, if it ends up being a case of they kill one of our creatures, we've got a backup one here. So let's see how we go. Oh, all right. That's not terrible. Okay, so we've knocked them down, and at this point in time, I'm going to bring out our second Annex. I'm going to keep the untapped version, so they'll both trigger, and we'll get a bunch of 1/1s. I'm going to bring this into play, bring it into play tapped, the land. So now we've got 4 land, which means we'll be able to pump up if we choose to attack. We'll be able to cast our Embercleave, we'll be able to potentially burn many creatures. And I was about to say, if we draw a Torbrand, we'll be able to play that to do lethal, which is where we're at. So we attack in with everything. And our opponent scoops it up. Okay, so this looks not too bad. So we've got a couple of 1-drops and a burn spell, and then we've got a 3-drop. So basically it's fairly aggressive. We'll see how we go. First things first, let's swing in for some damage. See if we can continue to push the damage through. Yeah. Put down a second Reverend Champion. So as these attack, they will target each other because they're both knights, and they'll pump each other up, which is quite nice. And then we'll pass turn back to our opponent. At the end of, if they don't cast any creatures, I will probably burn them. They do cast a creature. And I have to select something for them to see. So I'm going to select this land, which they'll choose whether or not they want to pitch it. They do get rid of it, unsurprisingly. And going to take care of this. Play the Phoenix, attack in for 6 damage, which will drop them down to 9. Alright. As you can see, this deck is really quick. It's a matter of seeing if we draw the answers to what they put into play. At this point in time, something that has a bit of haste or an Ember Cleave would be fantastic. What are they going to select? Phoenix. Interesting. They pick that. They do pick it. Okay. We tack in with our 2 champs. Dropping them to 5. I'm going to play out my hand. If they have an extinction event, we will gain a 3/3 back. If they kill these 2, it will knock them down to basically I have a choice of killing this or doing 2 points of damage to them. So really depends what they decide at this point. Okay, cool. Alright, so at this point in time, we get to attack. Let's see if they block. They should, because if they don't, they'll die. On the same token, if they block, we're going to still get some extra value. They were pretty much in a rock and a hard place there. I don't think they had a lot of options. Okay, so this is one of those hands where it's like, it's almost good enough to keep, but it's almost good enough to pitch. Look, this is a bonus game, so I'm gonna, see how we go. Our opponent goes down to 6. Not bad. Just really depends on whether or not we can get enough damage pushed before they start to build their board state. Okay. Yeah. Alright, so clear out the creature, do a little bit of damage. Next turn we play Annex, sorry, not Ajax, Annex. Down to 18 for them. Gold span, yeah. Gold span. Dragon. Alright, so we've got 4 here, so it means that we can attack in. So they're going to take 12 from that. I'm going to kill their Lotus Cobra. Just because I don't like it. Basically. Okay, our opponent decides they can't mount a good defense against such an overwhelming push. Okay, cool.